Um, I just, some of you have already, you know about my YouTube channel. That's kind of why you're here. Other of you do not know. So my name is Fajika. I just want to do a small introduction. My name is Fajika. I actually went through the home care licensing process going on 5 years ago. It's 5 to 6 years now. And the whole reason why I started my channel is because at the time that I was going through the licensing process, I didn't see a lot of resources specifically for California. Now, I saw other states out there, they were doing their thing, a lot of great content, but nothing that really went over California's actual regulations. And so I kind of just took one on the chin, put the pedal to the metal and learned it, did the best that I could, and I did well. So my commitment kind of to myself was, listen, if I could get through this, I don't want another person to try to get on YouTube and not be able to have the support that they need. So I started helping people in California, and just over the years, it has expanded to other states. And so that's kind of the story of me. What I like to do quite often, I didn't do it last year, but I did a couple years ago, is just 10 days of home care. And it's really another avenue to support you all as you're going through your home care journeys. And so every day we just kind of tackle topics. So yesterday, if we're not here yesterday, we just really talked about that concept of turning your passion into an actual thriving business, because a lot of us came to this business by helping a family member, or just working through it. And so today we are talking about something really important, and that's the caregiving hiring process. Okay, so we've kind of already did a welcome. I did a long welcome. But what I wanted to start with today is making sure that you're hiring the right caregivers, because you're always going to find caregivers. That's going to be the easy part. I would say the harder part is finding the right caregiver that's going to help ensure high quality care and make sure that your clients are satisfied. Because when you have satisfied clients, that's when your business is truly successful and you are able to grow. Okay. So let's talk about continuing to talk about why hiring the right one matters. Because we do want someone who's compassionate and empathetic. If you all have either worked with or had someone care for a family member that is not compassionate, you know that's not a person you want working in your agency. Someone who doesn't want to be there, someone who really doesn't care about that person's needs, it's not a good feeling. And so you always want to make sure that you can find someone who's passionate, empathetic. I feel like as long as that person's coming with good intentions, they have that previous experience, you can work on the rest. But they gotta come to the table with compassion. That's just my opinion. Absolutely, we need reliability and trustworthiness. They need to have strong communication skills. Okay, so if something's going on at that client's home, rather than that caregiver just leaving your agency without saying something, you want to build that relationship with that caregiver to where they feel comfortable explaining to you what's happening. Okay. Experience and certifications as required in your state will give you more guidelines on that. And then the adapt to problem solve. They are there along with that client. So, you want to make sure you have a person who really has that experience, that maturity to problem solve, right? And we've kind of talked about compassion, but just having that passion for caregiving. And man, when those caregivers are out there, when they're passionate and you find the right one, there is nothing better than someone who enjoys providing quality care. So I want to spend some time talking about defining your hiring needs, because there's always going to be, logistically, you're going to have a number in mind. But I also want to make sure that as the agency owners, you are really taking the time to understand what your hiring needs are. So if you are constantly having turnover because of attendance, well, you're hiring for that need of someone who's reliable, right? And so you're going to cater your process or cater your interviews, and we'll talk about that a little bit more based on that need. Okay, so definitely you're going to determine the number of caregivers you need. You're going to identify the specific skills that's required. you're going to kind of decide what mix is best for your business. You need time, part-time. Some states are still allowing independent contractors, so you want to have some of those. Either way, you want to make sure that you're setting clear expectations for job roles and responsibilities. This is also important for someone who has had experience before. A lot of our caregivers come to us with working in different agencies. Maybe they've had years of experience. You really want to be clear in what your agency is doing. I would say the best example I have is we all know for non-medical home care agencies, we should not be dispersing medication. A lot of agencies, for whatever reason, or maybe that person is coming from a skilled nursing facility, right? Maybe so we'll just assume innocence here. But if they are used to passing medication and you're non-medical, you want to make sure that the caregiver knows we're not doing that here. You can do reminders, but you cannot pass that medication. Okay, so that's a clear example. So I always like to say part of my orientation, we go over that job description. I just want to make sure you and I both understand what I'm asking you to do for my agency. And then, of course, that's a perfect time for that caregiver to ask me questions that they may have. Okay. Recruiting strategy. So where do we find caregivers? So I personally, my favorite place to go is care.com. And the reason why I like care.com is because it is more suited towards nursing. I mean, Indeed is going to give you a lot of candidates. But for me, sometimes I question the quality of those candidates. So if you're looking for volume, if you're just getting started, if you don't mind weeding through those applicants, Indeed is good. But like I said, care.com is a little bit more aimed towards what we're looking for. For instance, I know in California, we like our caregivers to be registered with the state. You can, for instance, have care.com, once you do your posting, hey, only send me people who are registered with the state. Only send me people who are CPR certified, just things of that nature. So for me, I like care.com. But you can also go to My CNA Jobs. That's another place that you can go. Local CNA and HHA training schools. I have a couple of my agency owners who have great partnerships with those schools. So I would definitely, even if you're not hiring out of those candidates, having that partnership can benefit your agency in so many ways. So I just encourage that around. And then referral programs. I would definitely say if you have high performing caregivers, most of the time, their referrals are going to be similar to them. Remember, birds of a feather flock together. So if you are a strong caregiver, I want your referral. Okay. So you definitely want to create those referral programs so that will encourage your employees to refer those caregivers. Okay. And then of course, social media and networking events. So if you're looking for caregivers, definitely have that on your social media platform. So let's talk about the screening process. Now, I would just kind of give an example with care.com in terms of, show me my candidates who meet all of my recommendations. Here are my deal breakers, those types of things. So you can build the screening into your actual job posting. But once you actually start to interviewing that person, you want to make sure that you're reviewing the applications and resumes for that relevant experience. You don't want to just interview everyone who applies, because a lot of times people will apply and they don't even have experience, or they don't have the qualifications you're looking for. So it's really important that you're not, wasting your time or theirs by interviewing people who just really would not be able to represent your agency in the way that you would want. Okay. Now, you can conduct phone screenings. For me, I like to do group interviews. And I know that's not always popular. But if I have 10 or 15 people that show up to a call, first of all, I do let them know that they're joining a group call. But this is a way for me to just really quickly have people answer a base of questions. So I typically start off that call letting them know who I am, what I'm looking for, what the job entails. That way, if the person is not interested, If that sounds like something they don't want to do or they can't do, maybe they can't work those hours, they can drop from the call, right? Which is then alleviating them from the process. Um, so I like to do group calls. Sometimes people like to do phone screenings individually. It's completely up to you. And I feel like for me, I'll just be honest, my hiring has changed over the years. So don't feel like you have to come to a straight process right away. It may change and evolve as you change and evolve as an owner. Okay. Look for red flags such as frequent job hopping or lack of certifications. I would also have to say a red flag for me is how a person responds to questions. So if a person is avoiding a question, or maybe they give you a 1 or 2 word answer, um, I think the more that you interview, the more experience that you have, you can kind of discern who's avoiding those questions because maybe they're not being truthful or because they don't have the experience you're looking for versus someone just being nervous. Okay, so there is a difference, and I think the more you talk to people, you'll be willing to kind of understand where that person's coming from. Okay. Okay, so the interview process itself, you definitely want to make sure that it's structured. You want to ask those behavioral questions. So tell me about a time, how do you handle, give me a specific example. So if you think of a person who is giving you 1 to 2 word answers, you can kind of break through that by saying, can you give me a more specific answer than that? Can you tell me about a specific situation? Because sometimes people want to talk in generality, right? And so you want to know specifically what a person has done in the past, right? Now the interview, when I actually get to this level of interviews, this is more in person, or it can be on Zoom, but it is definitely one-on-one. This person has passed the screening process, and so now you want to dive into more this person's experiences and really understanding what they're looking for in a job as well. Okay. And then you want to access those soft skills and cultural fit. And we've already talked about making sure that you're hiring based on your agency. Something I want to talk about with the agency needs really quickly is I love referrals. I'm sorry, not referrals, references. I love referrals, but I'm talking about references. I like to ask for 1 to 2 references and definitely professional ones. I don't need someone that's a family friend or your friend or someone who thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. I want to speak to someone that you have worked for. Because again, if you are having a hard time retaining your caregivers, you want to make sure the person that you're hiring is, has good rapport, right? There's only so many questions that you can ask, but sometimes you'd be surprised by just saying who you are and the reason for the phone call. You'd be surprised what you learn. Okay. Let's talk about background checks and verification. So I want to start off by saying you want to make sure that you're in compliance with what your state regulations are. Okay. But definitely for background checks and verification, we're verifying that they have the certifications that they say they have, and more importantly, what you. Okay. And then we're also conducting that criminal background check. And this point was on here. I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember, so that's why I mentioned it. But you want to check references from previous employers. I have been talking for a minute. Let me go over it. Any questions? Oh, that's a great question. Someone said, do you recommend, so this is Mater. Mater says, do you recommend networking with social workers? Could they help with referrals as well? Absolutely. Absolutely, they can help. One thing that I will say is, for whatever reason, I have noticed with the caregiving industry, there are so many, I want to say, like different prongs into the healthcare industry. Social workers, caseworkers, anybody who is typically surrounded by caregivers, they are an excellent source for when you actually need caregivers. So if you have social workers or you can network with them and pull them into your network, absolutely. I would say that's a blessing. That's a great question, Maynard. Absolutely. One thing that I didn't say on here, you would be surprised, but even churches. Churches are a great place for caregivers. Um, but definitely what I would say, you kind of heard me say before that as soon as you're licensed, you want to kind of sound the alarm, let everyone know. It's the same thing when you're hiring. In the course of your regular, normal, everyday conversation, let people know you're looking for caregivers. You would be surprised how many referrals that you get. Okay, so great question. Thank you for that, Mater. Training and onboarding. So a lot of times our states are going to help with this because I'll use my own state as an example. For the state of California, part of the licensing process is what does your, initial training look like, and then what does your ongoing training look like, right? So you got to have 5 hours before they even see a client, and then there should be 5 hours ongoing throughout the year. And so because of that, in California, we're kind of set up for success in that way. So you really want to make sure that there's a way that you can orient that person in their position. You don't want them to just kind of come, start, and then they're thrown out to the client, right? And so sometimes I know that's what we want to do because we're looking for that person and we need that hire. But as much as you can, I really want to slow down the process so you can bring that person in. Because remember, that caregiver is, trying to understand, is this a place I want to grow with? Is this a place I want to stay? Or is this an agency like the other 10 agencies I've worked for? Okay. So you want to provide that orientation on company policies and values. And listen, I don't recommend that you sit down and go through that whole policy and procedure, but anything you want that caregiver to know, you want to go over during that time while you have their attention. Okay, so I love orientations. I love putting on orientations because it's usually a happy time. This person is new to your agency. You're very happy with your hire. You're hopeful for the person that you hired. So this is that time to really start building that relationship. Okay. So also part of the onboarding should be hands-on training. So what are those safety protocols? What are those client interaction best practices? And another tip to hold on to your caregiver is some of your caregivers that have been with you for a longer time, or maybe they started your agency, they were one of your first caregivers in your agency. You may have them be your training caregiver, right? Maybe that lead caregiver. Because whether or not that comes with money will depend on your agency and the finances and the health of it. But even if you kind of start lining up who those people that would eventually be leaders for your organization, it makes a person feel good that you look on that caregiver as a person that could potentially be in a leadership role. So maybe this person, every time we hire a caregiver, that caregiver gets to shadow that person while they're taking care of the client. Okay. So I like to do that because people like to feel wanted, they like to feel needed, and certainly they like to be appreciated. Okay. But definitely, we're going to share with them as we're onboarding them documentation, reporting what that looks like. And then, like I've already talked about, pair those new hires with experienced caregivers for mentorship. Okay. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit as I've been talking, and really retaining quality caregivers is huge. You spend a lot of time and money recruiting for these caregivers because remember, a lot of times you're paying for those postings, and whatever marketing you're doing to attract that caregiver, you're spending time training them, you're spending time onboarding them, and money, right? So once we get them, we really want to keep them with us. Okay. So the best way to do that is to offer competitive pay and benefits. Now, this is easier said than done because, again, we always want to make sure that we are being profitable, right? So let's say the competitive pay isn't something you're in a position to do. We already talked about providing those opportunities for career growth and training, right? We talked about let's foster a positive workplace culture. And we talked about this earlier in the presentation. If that caregiver had a complaint or maybe a grievance, would they feel comfortable talking to you? The answer to that is dependent upon that workplace culture that you've established. And we'll be talking about that more tomorrow. But your leadership dictates whether that caregiver feels comfortable speaking with you. And then recognition and rewarding outstanding performance. If people are doing a great job, say something, shout it out. So we all have heard that term, you want to kind of critique in private but reward in public, right? Or praise in public. And so maybe a client gives you a glowing review, or they're just so happy with your caregivers, with the work that they're doing. Send an email, share that positive feedback that you're receiving. It makes other people like, oh wow, Fajika got that compliment, right? It makes them kind of inspired to do the same thing. At some point, you should have a mechanism in where you're looking for feedback from your client. So maybe you're getting your feedback from there. Maybe you're getting your rewards from there. And so maybe if a person gets a compliment, maybe you get a cup of coffee on you, or just go to Kinko's and have those nice. Do they have Kinko's anymore? I'm aging myself. Go to a FedEx and just laminate. We can go on Canva, make those certificates and laminate them. People love that. People love recognition. It's not always monetary, right? And for those of you who have experience providing care, another example I have is, maybe all the people have perfect attendance in a month, maybe do a drawing, and whoever wins that drawing maybe is you as the agency owner taking care of that client, their person's client for 2 hours. Just something like that. But you have to get creative when it comes to making sure these people are invested. They are heavily bought into your agency, so that you can retain them. And then conduct regular check-ins and encourage open communication. I think the challenge that a lot of us have is our employees are in the field. So this is not like you're going into the office and seeing them. They're in the field. So if you are that type of person, text messages are great. Hey, I probably won't see you today. Have a wonderful day. Just checking in to see how Mr. So-and-so is doing. Wanted to check in and see how this client is doing. Text me back when you have a chance, but in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Those types of things go a long way. Okay. So overcoming those hiring challenges, we all have them, right? We know that we have high turnover rates, caregiver shortages, employee burnout. So the main thing is maintaining that quality. So even though you are, this is a good situation to be in. Even though you're growing fast, you're not compromising quality. You're not, saying, oh, you know what, we won't have orientation this time. Just start tomorrow, right? So we're still doing those compliant things that we started our agency with. We continue with those things. And make sure, again, that this environment that you're creating is a supportive and motivating one. Okay? And seeing toxicity, address it right away. I'm really hoping in these 10 days I'll be talking about leadership and management and more HR related issues. You've got to make sure that you address the toxic people, because they truly, if you don't address someone who is toxic, it just spreads. And next thing you know, your positive, great caregivers are acting like the one who's not. So you've got to make sure that any issues that you see, you stand up and address them. Okay, so we'll talk about, I'm sure in these 10 days, we'll be talking about that a little bit more. Okay. That was the last screen. So I am going to put back over to my folks to see if I have any more questions. If you do have any questions in the chat, make sure you kind of add them now. And one thing I did want to share, I think I shared with it yesterday. I won't talk about it so much today. I'll probably wait to the end of this week. But I am starting a community. This is something people have been asking for years. And I don't know, didn't want to commit to it. But now this is something that I'm looking into creating for you all. So I'm going to have a lot more information for you a little bit later this week. Hi, Lorella. How are you from Illinois? Thank you so much for stopping by. So what did y'all think? Did you like this presentation today? Hiring your caregivers is really important. The people you bring on are really important. I will always say, when you do not have the right people on your team, you definitely feel like you're working more and you're working harder, and that's because you are. It takes a lot to deal with people who are not performing. Okay, so it's really important to bring on to your team. Okay. So as a reminder, tomorrow will be day 3, and we will be talking about creating your agency culture. So really important. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm glad it was helpful. Listen, that is all I have for you all today. I want you to have a blessed day, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.